and welcome to the ThunderCast, your literally only place for a Thundercat podcast. I've got my pal Marmaduke here with us,
I made it.
and I've got Pellegrini slash Mark,
Here.
and we are going to discuss all the things regarding Thundercats in this podcast. Today's topics of concern are going to be covering the episodes Sixth Sense and Thundercutter. We're going to be doing a character retrospective on the character Hachiman, which was actually the very first character for the very first Thundercast back in 2016, back when I had a completely different set of co-hosts. And we're going to be going over Thundercats He-Man issue 3 and issue 4 because we need to power through it. God, I hate it. I hate it so very much. So go ahead, boys, and say hi to the audience.
Well, thanks for having me on. I noticed what's his name? Nintendo had.
Let me stop you. I will rip your throat out, and I will beat you to death with it.
I was just gonna say, I see you showing up everywhere. Like if you're not showing up attacking pedophiles or something, you're showing up in like the trending videos, and you had a good argument. So you're what is it? You're like a bad version of Jaga floating around my internet usage, but everywhere in my feed you're popping up. So
Now that was just hurtful. Bad version of Jaga. That just hurts, man. Why you gotta be like that? But no, I saw what you said. I'm gonna torture Leah. Nah, I know what you're up to. I know who you are. I come for you, big boy.
No, I'm gonna make you forget about Roar this time by annoying you about other things.
Oh no! All right, let me go ahead and put this out so I can share the link on my tiny little platform here. Second here. So what you guys been up to this past month?
Boy, well,
I've been
Go
I've been
ahead.
coughing a lot, and there's a stickiness in my lungs. Do you think I should get that checked out?
No, be a man and power through it.
Yeah, it's a cold. That's all.
Just take some Robitussin. That's all you need.
No, punch it right in the chest. Rip
So
and
I
tear.
COVID right out of me.
I work in essential services, so everybody basically got like a mandatory vacation / fired, and I just had the problem of I can never get a break.
I mean, so basically, I'm working remotely from home because I'm essential. You know, I was really honored. But they did. Luckily, my job at this point is that I can do it from home. You know, not a lot of people are that fortunate, so I'm not complaining. At least I can pay my rent and put food in my mouth until this is all over.
Yeah, and it's like I was saying to you earlier, like my last day at my current job was yesterday, so you know, I'm gonna be able to put some time to personal projects before my new job starts up one way or another. We got Marm. Don't know what Marm does. Probably sitting around looking at YouTube videos all day, Marm.
This time, I'm actually finally getting back into reading comics to review.
No.
I did all my Thundercats homework this week, so that's good.
Was some tough homework, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
read,
This is the hardest. He-Man is one of the hardest assignments I've had.
Of course he is. He's He-Man. Have you seen his abs? All right.
Shred cheese on though.
Let's go ahead and get into the topic du jour. Let's go ahead and first talk about the episode Sixth Sense. Mark, why don't you go ahead and lead us off with the synopsis and then give us your thoughts on the episode.
All right. Well, in this one, a spaceship crashes on Third Earth, and it's got some sort of psychic link with Cheetara, and we learn about her sixth sense, which is a plot point she'd actually used frequently throughout the series. But it basically puts her in a coma and has her start like speaking like Reagan from The Exorcist and going all nuts. And then the mutants find out about it, and they decide that they want this crazy alien technology. Just because the Thundercats want it. So if the Thundercats want it, then the mutants want it too. That's kind of how it goes. And so the Thundercats and the mutants just kind of fight with each other over this spaceship. Thundercats have to get it back because if they don't get it back, then Cheetara is going to die. And all right, so my thoughts on the episode. It's an important episode because it goes into Cheetara's sixth sense, which is something that she used a lot in the show, or semi-frequently. It wasn't like Tigra's crazy bullshit. I can create holographic projections with my brain, but I can only do it once. Thing that he has later on. The episode it's not bad. It's just that one of my favorites. It has inconsistent animation, not bad animation, but you can tell where they put the time and the budget and where they didn't. So like there's a part where the mutants find out about the spaceship and they're in Castle Plundar and they're talking to Vulture Man and it just looks really clumsy, really clunky and choppy. and there's a lot of scenes that look like that. But then just like all of a sudden, when Vulture-Man's in his flying machine and he's trying to get the spaceship off Hook Mountain, and the spaceship deploys these like 3 or 4 little drone fighters to go after him, just all of a sudden the animation goes through the roof and it looks fantastic for about 45 seconds to a minute, and then it goes back to being choppy and kind of ugly. But that's the good thing about Thundercats, that it's when Thundercats animation is taking a breather in quality or in budget, it isn't error riddled. It's not like Transformers where it's like you don't know what the hell's going on because the animation got so bad. It's just that it gets kind of static is what I'd call it, but it's still, the art usually still looks good. Um, I don't know. There's not a whole lot to really say about this one. I like the second one that we watched a lot better, Thundercutter, and I'll have a lot to say about that one.
See, I thought you'd have a lot to say about Vulture Man in this one, because I mean we talked about Vulture Man last time, but it's sort of like a lot of the things we talked about got stated explicitly in this episode. He has like some of his great reactions. Like there's this great scene where the alien spaceship's crashing and exploding, and then it's sort of like he reacts as if it's hurting his ears.
I've got it on screen.
Can we retitle this the Vulture Cast? Because I could just talk about Vulture Man all day and night.
I have a feeling it's a character. You have a feeling it's a character you identify with, and you don't want to tell anybody.
I do. I think you know what? He's my spirit animal, Vulture Man.
I mean, once Mark mentioned it to me and I started looking for it, like it seems really obvious to me that he was he must have been a favorite for the artist, because they're always giving him funny stuff to do.
Because I don't know what it is about his. I think it's just his anatomy lends itself to doing those sorts of cartoonier expressions. Like he's got that long neck, and they do get a lot of mileage out of that long neck that he has in this episode. Like he's always like extending it forward like a flamingo, and then like cocking it back, and he's just looking really goofy and funny throughout the episode. But he's like that in every episode. I could, like, he's always the highlight almost of whatever he's in. Yeah. And that's I don't know. There's nothing else to really say that I could think about from this one. It kind of reminded me of an old Space Ghost episode where there's this spacecraft that like infiltrates Ghost Planet and jacks everything up, and they destroy it at the end. And they're like, "So where'd the spacecraft come from? We may never know." And that's it. Wrote yourself into a corner, huh? Yeah, nice save there at the end, Space Ghost. But yeah. Like this episode just has the spacecraft come out of outer space, it messes everybody up, and then it just goes back into space. And like, so where did it come from? I don't care. It's gone now.
Good lord, you'll be
well. Since Vulture Man is clearly like my husbando, and I need a body pillow for him.
Please no.
I noticed like the line Professor Vulture Man. That's great. But
Professor Vulture Man, I forgot about that. Yes.
But there's also a contrast between him and Monkey in here, where he calls Monkey a scavenger and a primitive. It's kind of interesting to me that Vulture Man illustrates the opposite of like the moral of the story. So the moral of the story is when people don't understand something, they're afraid of it and they want to destroy it. So Vulture Man gets that we can't study this thing and use it if you break it, Monkeyin. But when the Thundercats show up, Vulture Man's ready to have Monkeyin smash the thing up. So it's sort of like Vulture Man as a scholar is less savage and less destructive than Monkeyin, but he's still a bad guy.
There's a
he
funny
doesn't want the
part
Thundercats to have it.
It's almost underestimated, I thought it was funnier than it probably really was, but it's when they're on Hook Mountain and Vulture Man is just like screeching at Monkeyin because he shot up at the spaceship, and he says like, if Monkeyin hasn't destroyed the machine, and Monkeyin's like, look, it's glowing, it still works. And he's like, oh. Like Monkeyin just kind of puts him in his place, like if it was broken it wouldn't be glowing, now would it?
Good lord. All right, so
one last thing. This is just a really heartfelt episode, I think, for just the pain Cheetara goes through. And I noticed that when she started blasting the mutants, she blasted Monkeyin first, because Monkeyin was the one who hurt her.
That is one thing I will compliment this episode on, is that it feels kind of tedious through a lot of it, and Cheetara spends the whole episode just lying on a table screaming. And you're right, it is kind of like, geez, like this is like, did Eli Roth direct this episode? What the heck? But then it has a great rally moment at the end when she finally just like gets up and takes charge, and she uses her sixth sense to control the spaceship and just like absolutely wrecks the mutants. And it's a sequence that goes on. Like she gets her revenge at the end of the episode. It does feel very satisfying. In fact, they clear the mutants out of Castle Plundar. You know,
Yeah.
like, and then they all just. It feels like they could do that whenever they want, but they
My
don't.
house now, not your house. My house now. Get out.
Because they're merciful. They just
They're merciful, except they kind of get a little cartoony with the physics in one scene at the end there, where Cheetara forces Monkey to jump off the roof of Castle Plundar, and he falls like 20 stories and lands in a sky cutter and then just flies away. Like a coyote or something. It's a little cartoonier than the show.
Well, I mean, they got nuclear bombed in midair, and then you just see three little shapes dropping down. Like it looks like Dream Rockets blasting off again.
Good
Right.
lord.
Well, that entire sequence when they're all running from the spaceship through the quarters of Castle Plundar, they're leaving this trail of dust behind them, you know, very cartoony, and they have their arms up in the air like, whoa, here we go again. And they're all like really goofy. It's a funny sequence at the end of the episode, and I guess it's kind of deserved because the episode is, I'm not saying unpleasant, but I mean it's just Cheetara laying there screaming for 20 minutes. You kind of needed that levity at the end.
Yeah, you did. But real quick here, near the end of the episode is the only time they have ever made any sort of like shipping references, and the community ran wild with it for the past 35 freaking years.
Oh, you'd have to read my mind.
That and the spaceship pushing Lion-O into Cheetara, and
they're kind of like blushing at each other almost.
yeah, and then it's so out of place because Thundercats never does that before or after that specific scene. So I don't know what they were thinking then. Maybe going into the show notes will tell us a little bit more. But just, hello, let us reference this once and never again.
Oh,
And the first episode, doesn't Cheetara like say that Lion-O looks so handsome and then winks at him?
Well, yeah,
You know,
but
it's almost like they kind of wanted to play with it at the very early parts of the series, but then they just kind of like dropped it. You're like, you know what, this is a bad idea. He's technically a 10-year-old boy, so let's not go.
Well, that and when I see that episode and I see that commentary, my first thought is that's something a mom says.
Yeah.
It's like, aren't you my little handsome boy? I hate suits. Get me out of this thing. I feel like a monkey. It's like if your mom says you're handsome, it doesn't count. But if your mom says you're ugly, it definitely counts.
You feel like you have a Millhouse moment. My mom says I'm cool.
All right, let's go ahead and get into the show notes here. All right, so let's see here. You have failed me. Let's see here. Okay. Written by Peter Lawrence, one of the best writers on the show. Featuring Cheetara as its central character, Sixth Sense is an interesting investigation into her psychic abilities. The premise is handled well, and the darker side of her gift is explored, leading to some disturbing scenes as she becomes possessed. The nature of the mysterious craft that crashes into the atmosphere of Third Earth is cleverly concealed throughout the entire episode. Not only does this add considerably more to the suspense, but it also allows the episode to concentrate on the ship, not on the ship, but on its effect on Cheetara. Sixth Sense is cleverly constructed and, with the personal jeopardy of a lead character, offers a real sense of danger that the Thundercats must overcome. This isn't just the result of a villainous plot, which makes the story even more original. We also begin to see some dissension among the mutants here, as Monkeyan ignores Vultureman's order to lead the ship unharmed. Nothing attracts Monkeyan and gets away free. Vultureman's scorn of his companions proves his role as an intellectual superior, and some fascinating subtext is touched upon regarding the mutants' compulsion to destroy anything that is not fully understood. Some witty moments are littered throughout the episode. Snarf's comment that he's too close to the ground to enjoy snow raises a smile, and Peter Lawrence playfully explores the relationship between Lion-O and Cheetara, one that would seem the alien craft is keen to encourage. While Cheetara's psychic ability had previously been only marginally explored, Sixth Sense showcases her character and the fact that she is known to remain strong and resolute even as she nears her end. It is a testament to the script writing. Cheetara would never be a stereotypical female heroine, and this episode proves to be no exception. Writer's commentary from Peter Lawrence. Lee Daniger always felt the male-dominated writing and production team gave Cheetara a short shift. And she was right. As a side issue, We tried to recruit female writers, but it was difficult. Kim Morris was successful for us and a pleasure to work with, a very dry wit and tough audience. She made me think hard about her work, and that challenge is always a pleasure for an editor. In general, however, we didn't have much luck in balancing the team. Perhaps because Thundercats was perceived as a boys' show, and a lot of women writers in kids' animation were writing shows like My Little Pony. If that's a stereotype, it's no less true for the beginning, for being stereotypical, I wonder. No more than no more than curiosity. How many guys were in or on the staff of My Little Pony, Berenstain Bears? If the answer to that is lots, then that's even more powerful indictment of sexism in the industry. So Lee pressed me to further Cheetara's character, to use her power, and to feature her more predominantly. And this and this episode is one result. I always felt like a lot of writers shy away from working with self-evident truth that women are different from men. Intimidated by the potential accusation of stereotyping or sexism, they prefer to simply make the female hero, and they don't even like to use the word heroine much, they say, offends some feminists, a guy in a dress. Not a crossdresser, of course, simply a player that looks like a woman but is actually male in character. I think it's possible, even in this genre, to build a character that is essentially female but uses her feminine persona and power in a superheroic way. That is, her femininity does not diminish her, it enhances her. So here we see Cheetara behaving in a selfless, supportive, and caring heroic way, ways that perhaps the male characters would not have chosen. It's interesting that Sly's ultimate solution is to blast the alien ship to pieces. Perhaps had there been a female mutant, she would have found a more feminine way to unleash the ship's power. Sure, all this sounds pretentious and even politically correct, but we weren't motivated by PC, and it's that simple. See The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, we developed Jessie similarly, to be a real woman as well as a heroic figure. Interesting that once we had let the show, the ensuing writers and producers put her in an effing pink dress, so I'm told. I was so disgusted by the various events there that I never watched that version of the show. I always hope that writers, whatever their social or political persuasions, will show some insight and courage, break molds, and stand up to the crasser demands of their producers, the merchandisers, the market, but it's often a vain hope. The paycheck is everything, and never more so than now. I'm sure I've sold out too many times along the ways, but to return to the essentials, this was an attempt to develop Cheetara further, to make her more interesting and more powerful, and to guarantee her roles in future episodes.
It's really interesting how that's like basically been like the hot topic of the last couple years in writing since Rey in Rise of Skywalker. I noticed that really kicked up this conversation all over again, and I kind of love how like I think artists have a different mentality than people who are politically minded, because for the artists they care about their art. So to me, that's kind of like that sentiment is basically the sentiment of someone who's ultimately caring about the art. The reason to have this strong female character is because it benefits the art. It's not to send some sort of they are trying to send a message to girls, but the message is rooted in actual ideas of heroism. It's not rooted in an idea of like we're gonna you can't fake heroism in a character, basically.
Yeah. I mean, you can try that.
For a character I think to be appealing as a protagonist and as a hero, male, female, whatever, they have to suffer and overcome. And if you give a character plot armor and you can't have them suffer, you can't have them lose, you can't have them fail, then they're boring. If they win all the time, if they never struggle, if they never have to persevere, then they're boring. And unfortunately, with a lot of female characters, that's the way they're written. And it's different eras do it for different reasons. You know, if you had like 20 years ago, a female character couldn't get, punched in the face, but male characters can get, have the shit kicked out of them all day and night. And, now you have characters like Rey, where everybody second guesses everything they want, Rey or one of these characters to do, because like, oh, can we do that? Will that be offensive? Will that be problematic? Will that trigger someone? Is that toxic? And so you end up with these homogenized, bland characters. And I think that entire very excellent write-up you just read explains why Cheetara is so, the classic Cheetara anyway, was so excellent as a character, not just a female character, but as a character. Like this episode actually is a good example of that. She really suffers through this episode. Like she does not have plot armor. She is hurting this whole episode, but she rallies at the end and she has a great triumphant moment and saves the day. She perseveres, struggles, and then overcomes after suffering quite a bit and going through a lot of mental and physical pain throughout the episode. stuff that you normally wouldn't see applied to female characters. Like, she really takes it on the chin in this episode, and that's one of the things why Cheetara is one of the best female characters to come out of the 80s. Yeah.
Correct. Correct on all ends in terms of that. But yes, that's why when people try to talk about to me, 80s, girl characters, they were just shoehorned. They were all damsel in distress. My first response is, how many of these shows have you watched? Because if you actually watch them, no, and you're stupid for that. How about you, Mark?
Mark? Marm?
Marm.
Just maybe going off of damsels in distress. Something I've been paying attention to is, what do damsels in distress do while they're in distress? Because if you think about it, it's one of the worst things that can happen to you. And I feel like people focus on the distress part, but they don't focus on like if a guy gets beat up and left for dead, right? Like, that's a bad thing that happens to him, and he's got to like get back up and get back to work. So I've been thinking a lot about how a lot of the great characters are off, female characters especially, like Princess Zelda or even Princess Peach. They are put into this distressful situation, but when they show strength in the midst of that situation, it's sort of like that's been their version of overcoming adversity, even in boy-led shows. Because the thing is, the protagonist tends to be the character who has to make the most decisions, because the story centers around him. So it's sort of natural that, like the Princess Zelda or the Princess Peach isn't the main actor in that story, because you're playing as Mario, you're playing as Link. But that it hasn't stopped like good writers and good creatives from finding ways to establish these characters anyway. You never look at like a plot point as something that dooms you, or you don't have to say, oh, if my female character is in danger, she's going to be a damsel in distress forever. No, you can have all the plot points you want. Just think about how to use those plot points, maybe to bring out what the soul of the character is.
That's fair.
Good advice, Marmaduke. You're so analytical.
Thanks.
We focus on the anal part of that. All right, so all right, so let's go ahead and let's see here. Take a look at the chat here. A Woman with Struggles reminds me of another show from Disney. I don't know. There's like a lot of characters that struggled in Disney, especially if we go back to the Disney Afternoon, like Rebecca Cunningham. But let's see here. Let's go ahead and move on to the episode Thundercutter. So we go ahead and get that up on the screen. Boom. All right, so Marmaduke, I want you to lead into this with the synopsis and
all
with
right.
the opinion.
So, one of Lio Convoy's favorite episodes of all time, the Thundercutter introduces us to Hachiman. In this episode, Mum-Ra determines that he needs a more capable assassin to take care of the Thundercats, and he summons Hachiman, who is bound by a Bushido code of honor. He believes it is his duty to serve his lord. Initially, Hachiman rejects Mum-Ra outright because he believes his sword cannot be bought. But Mum-Ra deceives him by telling him that the Thundercats are evil aggressors who are attacking his peaceful people. And this speaks to Hachiman's code of honor, and he decides to go in pursuit of Lion-O. The Thundercats are helping out the warrior maidens to defend their village, and Lion-O ends up meeting Hachiman at a bridge, kind of evocative of Little John and Robin Hood meeting at the bridge. Neither of them wants to give way to the other, and they kind of have like a stupid boys butting their heads against each other standoff. But as a result of this, Lion-O wins Hachiman's respect. However, once Hachiman realizes his code of honor means he has to kill Lion-O, he's distraught. He now has to fight a man he respects, but thankfully both of them have swords that can do no evil, which prevents them from murdering each other on the spot. And Hachiman with Lion-O take on. There's also a ninja who shows up, which is kind of interesting because it's like samurais and ninja, and the samurais are representative of honor, and the ninja is representative of fighting dirty and being a miserable little assassin. But all is well, and I guess it's kind of like the Thundercats encounter maybe like a Japanese worldview or a Bushido worldview that's slightly in contrast to their own.
They even kind of have a line of dialogue from Hachiman where he's arguing with Nayla, and she's trying to talk sense to him, and he basically says, like, just because you don't understand my code and my principles does not mean that they're wrong.
It is my belief, my code. And just because you do not understand it does not mean it is wrong.
Something I loved about that is that works as at a cultural level, like East meets West, and it works at a gender level where like she's a girl literally telling the boys to stop trying to kill each other, and the boys learn to respect each other after they try to kill each other, right? And they both kind of learn from each other in the end. Like Lion-O says, in a duel nobody wins, but
It's the weirdest moral to have at the end of an episode.
I will address that in a moment.
I was going to get in a duel with that kid at school. We were going to stab each other, but you know what? Now I'm not going to do that. Thanks.
Anywho.
Nayla's speech or when she's trying to talk sense to them, I love the way they phrase it, though. She doesn't, use those words like chauvinism or, oh, they're all acting on testosterone. Oh, boys will be boys. She never frames it as, pig-headed men. She just points out that they're being stupid. And that's it. And that's something that's gender neutral. Stupidity is for both sexes. So she just tells them, you're both acting like idiots. And they're like, yeah, I guess we were.
I sort of love this solution to, like, it's a classic narrative of the two guys meeting on the bridge. Like in Samurai Jack, he and the Scotsman fight each other. That would have looked here. So they come up with this solution that they both just start cutting away at the bridge until they fall to their deaths, and then they find out. Yeah, then they find out the swords don't work when they get to the opposite end of the bridge. That was like a really inspired moment. And I love the put down where Hachiman says a boy must move for a man, because it's continuing this theme of everybody tells Lion-O he's just a boy, he's just a cub, and he finally gets some respect from probably like one of the biggest men in the entire show, certainly.
Yeah.
So there's the episode itself. I love the way it's paced because it kind of it subverts your expectations, but in the right way. Where it starts with Mum-Ra summoning Hachiman to go fight Lion-O, and so you think it's going to be this really cut and dry episode where Hachiman goes to fight Lion-O. They fight. They find out that they're both on the same side. End of episode. Something really, really simple. But the episode doesn't do that. Instead, Lion-O and Hachiman meet in the second act, realize that they can't fight each other, and the entire plot of the episode changes. They capture Slythe and take him back to the Warrior Maiden's Ewok village, and then like Mum-Ra has to coordinate, and the mutants have to coordinate an escape plan for Slythe, and Lion-O and Hachiman have to work together to stop this ninja and the entire mutant army from getting Slythe out of there, and he escapes anyway. But like the entire premise of the episode changes halfway through, and you get basically a whole new story. It's really interesting that they did that. They kind of plussed themselves midway through the story and didn't go the expected route.
Yee.
Oh, yeah, I talked too much.
All right. So, does anybody else have any thoughts before I go on with this?
I will say that the only Thundercats toy I had as a kid was Hachiman. So that's why I have a certain like affinity for him. One, he's a good character, but also just because that was the only Thundercats toy I had. And holy crap, that toy! If you dropped that thing from space, it would kill the dinosaurs. It was so heavy.
I actually have
hefty toy.
I actually have him on card on my wall here.
Don't drop him on your foot.
God, no. But what irritated me about the Hachiman action figure was his sword is either in Chudan, or the middle position, or Jodan, the upper position. But the action gimmick has him move side to side.
I remember that, and his hand placement is kind of funny because he's basically got his hands like in a C position down in his crotch.
Well, yeah, that's actually proper though for the guard he's using. But I'll get into the general samurai nerd stuff here later.
I mean, I do have a sword question for you about what type of sword he has, because it's not a katana because it's not curved, right?
It is curved. He has a tachi, technically.
Sometimes, like the animators would not draw it curved. Sometimes it looks really straight.
Yeah, so but looking at like 80s action movies where they're all straight.
Well, no, I highly doubt that. Specifically because we're talking about Japanese animators and it's a samurai.
Right, they get that right.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna go.
One last thing. I really love how the line about the little sister was used, because when Hachiman first uses it, Lion-O kind of reacts immaturely. She's not my little sister. But then later, Hachiman uses it affectionately when she's in danger. So it's just a really nice, like, using the same line but in two completely different ways in two parts of the story example.
Yeah, I mean, there's great little details. Like, there's a part is when Hachiman and Lion-O come to terms in the second act. Like, Lion-O tries to shake his hand, and Hachiman like bows instead, and Lion-O just kind of like looks at his hand and puts it away awkwardly, like, "Oh, we're doing that instead." Okay.
Well, the fun thing about Hachiman and all that is basically what Hachiman does are nods to Japanese culture, specifically from the era he's in, which is based on his armor. I'm guessing it's early Edo or late Sengoku Jidai, or the Warring States era. There's actually more about Hachiman we'll go into in his character retrospective here. But little sister, or Nisan, it's an affectionate term you would have for a junior female. So it's actually a term of affection in that term. So when he says, "And take your little sister's advice," it wasn't him actually saying, "Ha ha ha, she's your little sister." It was, "This is a younger female. This is a friend of yours. Take her advice." And Hachiman, his belligerence on the bridge is very much so a samurai's right. Specifically, he would see Lionel as a commoner in this case, and you move out of the way for the samurai. More so, even if you are younger, you are to show them deference. So Hachiman's response is exactly what a samurai would have done. It's like, "You're in my way, move. I don't need to tell you this, but move." So you see that entire way it's played out. And the interesting thing is, when you look at how Hachiman's constructed, and we'll talk about this again a little bit more later, Hachiman is more accurate to how samurai would have act were they to go properly, historically as well. But let's go ahead and get into the actual episode itself. The moral, of course, being, just because someone's different doesn't mean they're wrong. This is written by William Overgaard. Overgaard was he tended to throw some of the most well-known secondary characters around. He tended to be the guy who introduced them. But here's what it says. A triumph of storytelling, Bill Overgaard's Oriental Tale provides unequivocally the many benefits the writer brought to Thundercats. While he would often overstep the mark, the Thundercutter perfectly balances the introduction of engaging and original characters and the successful utilization of the established characters and the world they inhabit. Hachiman, as a character, is perfectly formed, touching upon the very adult concept of honor that lies at his heart. Given Mum-Ra's main purpose in summoning him is to obtain his rival blade to the Sword of Omens, the samurai could have easily been a faceless swords wielder, and what emerges is far more original. The way in which Mum-Ra cleverly spins his version of Lion-O as an aggressor is brilliant, and great moments keep coming in abundance as the episode progresses. Overgaard's dialogue is in top form, and with some magical moments, including Lion-O's polite address to Hachiman. "Pardon me, sir, but as I started across first, I ask that you please back off. It is good manners if a boy gets out of the way for a man," replies the samurai. The childish banter of one-upmanship that follows also leads to a great line from Lion-O. "I am not a boy, and that is not my little sister." It is impossible to list all of the highlights from the episode, but notable elements include the ruins of Third Earth, which give us a brief but tantalizing glimpse into the history of the planet, the eerie ninja with his figure seen in almost complete silhouette, who is sinister and appealing and proves the perfect foil for Hachiman, a fun moment where Lion-O and his team improvise a catapult from a tree, and a flash of resourcefulness, Lion-O shows in improvising a ledge for the plummeting Nada. As mentioned, the episode touches on some of the adult subject matter, and the concept of negotiation is chief among this. The idea of Slide's capture being used as a bargaining counter is unusual for the series, and Mum-Ra's declaration, "Never do what your enemy expects," takes proceedings in an unexpected direction. A special note should also be given to both voice actor Peter Newman and to the Thundercat character designers who realized Hachiman with every bit of grace and imagination described in the script. The episode falls just short of perfection, incorporating a bizarre and unnecessary declaration that the wonderfully realized Treetop Kingdom is a 3 days journey from Cat's Lair, despite the small shortcut that the warrior maidens provide. Not only does this contradict previous episodes, not entirely problematic or uncommon in itself, but it also somewhat undermines the climax of the episode where the Thundercats respond to Lion-O's signal in a matter of moments. Nonetheless, this does not spoil a wonderful adventure, and from this point on, the return of Hachiman could have only ever been seen as mandatory. Commentary from Peter Lawrence. "I don't know what it is exactly, but swords have a fascination. One only has to think about the role they play in Star Wars, where swordplay is, as you would think, both incongruous and anachronistic, but nonetheless works perfectly. The latest Alice in Wonderland movie features a legendary sword, and surprisingly, it works. Since we, Lion-O, have the most powerful sword ever known, it was inevitable that other swords would be created to confront it. hence the Thundercutter. Bill Overgaard was a great student of Japanese and samurai culture and had written a movie called Bushido Blade for Arthur Rankin. He drew on that knowledge and the sense of fun that he had developed around the subject for this episode for the invention of Hachiman. And many of us know the involvement of Masaki Izuka, Arthur's long-standing love of Japan, and the coming of anime and the growing interest in Japanese animation were inspirational. We wanted to know more. If we wanted to know more, we had to read or watch Shogun. One of us went to Japan to meet with the animators to discuss and develop the show. I hope our respect for that world carries, though, even to this cartoon shown for the younger audience.
I'll just add, I've seen Shogun, and what I love about that is that's one of the few like Western series that has Toshiro Mifune in it as a character. So if you're not a big Japanese nerd like me, like Shogun might be a good like entry point into good like Japanese literature and good Japanese fiction, I think.
Well, that is
it stars the English cast.
It's really popular. I mean, I remember my parents had seen it and they talked to me about it. So, I mean, I watched it. God, so long ago, I hardly remember it. I couldn't even remember that Toshiro Mifune was in it, and if his English was any good.
Well, I'll tell you right now, the book was unapologetic, because usually when people write samurai fiction, specifically a Westerner writes it, it's always, it doesn't really address some of the ugliness of that time period. Now,
Yeah.
manga tends to do a very good job of it, even if it's a little bit overt. But what they outline in Shogun shows the barbaric and sometimes vile ways that people would act, even samurai in that time period. So I really do recommend it. Now, speaking of this episode specifically, Mumra talking about never doing what your enemy expects, that shows I'm old enough to know not to do XYZ thing. And using it to introduce yet another character to be more active in what he wants. It does introduce two problems. Number one, Mumra probably should have not gone for a character that was known to be honorable if you wanted to do a dirty deed. And secondly, he could have called the ninja any time. Fun fact, though. Hachiman, his name comes from the Shinto god of war, who is named Hachiman. So there's more that goes into that. But let's see here. Let's go ahead and look at the chat real quick before we move on. Hachiman versus Samurai Shinkenger. I'd say Hachiman simply because of some of the absurd feats he has. And, yeah, he kills a lot quicker. Let's see here.
There's one thing I really enjoyed about the episode. Like, it starts so well. The mutants are at Mumra's pyramid talking to him, and they're watching clips of episodes in the cauldron. And Sly's complaining about the sword. And Sly says, like, the sword, it's like it gains in power every day. It's almost like in every episode, the sword has a new power that a writer just pulled out of their ass. Isn't that weird? And then I love Mumra's rebuttal where he's like, sword? I'll show you a sword. And then he summons Hachiman. Like, it's just a great opening.
What's really interesting is also the fact that, number one, how Hachiman responds. It's not, I've been transported magically and I'm displeased. It's, what is this place? And who are these? Foreigners.
Yeah. I love that. Foreigners, yeah.
Beautifully stereotypical, but also, it's an interesting comparison here because we as Westerners, we see something like Mumra's Crypt, right? And everything about it, we identify evil, 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 evil. The statues on the wall, the sarcophagus, the reek of death and decay, the scrying pool. These are, despite their Egyptian trappings, generally Western concepts. But when Hachiman shows up, he doesn't show a hint of questioning because in Japanese culture, the things that were just described there, they're common. Statues of random deities are pretty common, even just walking down trails in Japan where you see, especially from the era he was supposedly in, and we'll get into that later, different statues here. Paying respect to the dead is normal. A scrying pool is basically unheard of. So to Hachiman, he wouldn't identify these things as evil because in his culture, it varies. It's much different what the Japanese consider to be visual trappings of evil compared to the West. So I thought that was interesting, even though it probably wasn't intentional.
And Hachiman is so chill with what's going on. I mean, it's obviously, I think we talked about it before. It's like, where the hell does this guy come from? Is he from the past? Is he from another planet? Is he from another part of Third Earth? You know, they never really make up their mind on that.
But they do. They do. And we'll get into that momentarily.
Okay, well, Well, before you rectify all that, the episode just if you watch this one in isolation, it seems like Hachiman's being pulled from the past just because he's dressed like a traditional samurai and the way he talks and everything. But he doesn't really seem to care that he's in the future or he was taken away from wherever he went from. And at the end, he just like walks away. Like they offer at one point to give him a ride in the tank, and he's like, no machines, a samurai. Yeah. Never uses machines.
But that implies he knows what it is. He doesn't call it a chariot.
Right? Like, so what, man? You're just gonna walk back to the feudal era?
He's that much of a man.
He does ride a robot horse in one episode, so I guess it's kind
Dozikage!
Yeah. I guess if the machine looks like an animal, it's okay.
All right, so let's go ahead and go into a character retrospective on Hachiman now that we've discussed the episode he premiered in, which is a really good segue here. So let me go ahead and throw up Hachiman image specifically. There we go. Hachiman unsheathing his Thundercutter Kankairi. All right, so let me go ahead and give a little bit of detail here. All right, so Hachiman, as previously stated, his name is based on the Shinto god of war. His armor is either late Sengoku Jidai or early Edo, but here's the fascinating thing. Out of all the characters, Hachiman is probably the biggest plot hole in all of Thundercats, and the reason why that is in his initial episode, we don't know where he came from. In his second appearance, during Thundercats Ho, Jaga says he went to his own world, his own time, his own dimension when Mumra retransports him. But in the episode Thundercutter, it's revealed he's from a planet called the Planet of the Rising Sun. And not only is that revealed, but Marm, I got a question for you. How old do you think Hachiman is by looking at him?
39.
All right, how about you, Mark?
Very specific. I mean, yeah, I would say like 40s. He just seems middle-aged.
Try 7,000.
Okay. He's just immortal?
Okay. So you're saying that the young handsome man is actually 7,000 years old, so it's not wrong for you to want him as your husbando. Is that it?
Well, the funny thing is, in the episode of Jade Dragon, you find out that the Thundercats, like, not the ones we're talking about, but Jaga specifically, has met Hachiman before. When Jaga was much younger, he freed him from a demonic object called the Jade Dragon. And in that episode, Mumra flat out says, Hachiman is as ancient as I. And thinking that Mumra is from ancient Egypt, and this is a far-flung future. That's about 7,000 years old. Hachiman is 7,000 years old.
Well, he knows magic. I mean, even in this episode, he just holds the Thundercutter up, like levitates it with his finger, and then it acts like a dowsing rod and points him in the right direction. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess he knows magic. You don't got to explain shit. It's magic.
Well, yeah, like that explains why he's so chill about so many things. He's probably ran into stuff like this so much that it doesn't even faze him anymore. Like
straight up Samurai Jack, isn't he?
I'd say he's
kind of like Guts from Berserk, like constantly fighting evil demon lords and things.
Yes, and here's the thing: you find out real quick, even in the first episode here that he appears in. Hachiman is nobody you dick with. What's his response to Slithe being downed? He wants to kill him. He wants to cut his head off his body because he's a cowardly snake. I will have nothing to do with him. And in the episode Jade Dragon, not only does he choke Mamut out from like the upper atmosphere and falls just fine onto New Thundera, but he's the only single character in Thundercats that Mumra is afraid of.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, Hachiman and the Thundercutter are basically just the Japanese edition of Lion-O and the Sword of Omens. And, you don't want to mess with the Sword of Omens. You don't want to mess with the Thundercutter either. It's basically almost as good a sword.
Yes, and there's never really any direct comparison given because we don't see a Hachiman all that often. And we don't see the Thundercutter in use in the same equivalent that you see the Sword of Omens. But it's a moot point when it comes to that. And when you study how Hachiman operates, how he acts, how he talks, it very much so goes to what his character is, and that is the samurai. He's a warrior. That's what his purpose is. And I like how close they got in detail. I like the fact that he's not your typical anime samurai that's really scrawny and moves around really quickly. This is a thick boy. Like, he is stout, and he will not play. He doesn't crack jokes. He occasionally laughs, But his intent is, if I'm going to do XYZ thing, that's what I'm going there to do, and nothing will stop me. At one point, one of the Lunatics takes advantage of his noble nature and winds up stealing his sword from him. And his first thought after having the sword stolen is vengeance. And that's all he goes for. The rest of the episode, I'm going to destroy whatever they put in front of me, and I'm going to pay them back for the embarrassment. And he succeeds. That's just how Hachiman is. But what I like about his character is he is stagnantly different from the Thundercats. I mean, his idea of honor isn't the same thing as the Code of Thundera's idea of honor. His idea of honor is, I will do what I say, and if I want you dead, you are going to be dead. Whereas Thundercats, they tend to show a lot more mercy towards their adversaries. Hachiman has no desire to. That speaks to also how long he's been around. He's probably well aware that if you don't take the evil out early, it's going to sit around there. So it's just an
anti-Saturday morning cartoon mentality.
Well, he's a samurai. He deals with reality. And he deals with, if I don't kill my foe, that gives my foe an ability to come back and kill me. But what's also really interesting is when you look at his sword. Now, I don't have a good shot of the detail up here, but the Thundercutter, occasionally he will, not occasionally, but he always has it slung like a normal uchigatana, or regular katana as we know it now. But if you look at the saya, it has the proper cord wrapping to be slung edge down like the tachi, because it is a tachi. When you look at its length, your typical uchigatana is about 40 inches from pommel to tip, or kisaki.
Now, I've got a question. So is this, maybe it's just a screenshot, but is this sword handle long enough to be wielded two hands? Because it looks
yes,
like
it is. It often is. Let me go ahead and pull up the other one here. Get rid of this. Nope, that's the wrong one. That's the Sixth Sense one. Sorry, hold on. Thundercutter. There we go. Where you see him in Jodan, two-handed. Yes, it is a two-handed weapon.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and hide this again.
So that is something I wondered about the Sword of Omens. I mean, so the Sword of Omens can't be used against good or innocent things. You can't use it to go hunting. You can't use it against another Thundercat. You can't use it to just like kill a normal innocent person. Could you use the Sword of Omens to kill an evil person? Would the Sword of Omens let you do that?
Yes, and it actually has.
Oh, did it kill Grun?
No, I mean Grun's been dead. But no, actually in the episode Swan Song, oddly enough, the Sword of Omens winds up killing the character 2 times.
Oh, okay, so there is a precedent. All right, because I was wondering if there was a distinction between like what the Thundercutter can do and what the Sword of Omens can do. Because like Hachiman was going to just straight up kill Slythe. He's like, I would finish him off. You know, so the Thundercutter doesn't seem to really care about killing, whereas the Sword of Omens seems to have more rules about it. But yeah, okay, if the Sword of Omens can be used to kill evil, then I guess it's on the same level as the Thundercutter.
Yeah, and when you look at it, like, okay, so it can be used to kill because it's a sword. That's its purpose. But I mean, you can't really do that with Mumra because he's just going to keep coming back. So I can understand why. As opposed to, say, I don't know, Filmation He-Man, to where even the writing team was like, what do we do with Skeletor? He's not immortal, but we can't just keep not killing him, right? It doesn't make much sense. And they talked about that a little bit in different pieces of media here. But the Thundercutter has no problem killing, and the Sword of Omens doesn't either, depending on the situation. The issue comes down to, is it a requirement? Is it necessary? In the case I'm referring to, what happened was 2 times decided he'd dick with the sword. So the sword just picked him up, spun him around, and when Lion-O told the sword to let him go, it flung him out of a window in the stratosphere of New Thundera, and he died. They address it in canon. He is dead. He is gone.
Like that. I like the sound of that. That's like a season
2.
A late season 2 episode, right? Yeah. So it's going to be a while before I get there. I only just finished season 1.
But also in the comics, specifically the Wildstorm Origins, the Sword of Omens actually took out Claudius's father.
Sword killed Claudius's father?
Yes.
Man, I don't remember that one. It's been forever since I read those awful comics.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess. But anywho, let's go ahead and give you guys his thoughts on Hachiman as a character, if you haven't already.
Great East meets West character. Great older brother type of relationship to Lion-O. I can see why you resonate with it. And maybe tapping into what you said earlier about a non-anime samurai. I think that's a really important distinction because, there's the historical idea of the samurai. There's like the swish, 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 and then everything falls apart into 1,000 pieces. How did he do it? Right. And then there's kind of like this magical idea of the samurai that's come to us through pop culture. And I feel like if you don't have to make them like as brutal as like a real historical medieval samurai would be, but I always feel like even a little bit of history adds some life to fantasy. So I think that helps Hachiman stand out from a lot of anime samurai, is just how rough around the edges he is.
That's one of the things I do like about him, is that he almost feels like a good compromise of the two different, the historical version of a samurai versus the pop culture version of a samurai. He's got that code of honor thing where he won't shut up about his honor, and that's how we like to portray samurais as the good guys, ninjas as the bad guys. Oh, samurais followed Bushido. Samurais were very honorable people, when historically a samurai would sharpen his sword on a passing peasant, and just kill him. Like they were good samurais back then, but there were trash samurais who were like barbarians and savages and would do awful things to people. And Hachiman, he's a good compromise between the two versions. He does talk about his honor, and he is a very honorable person. But as Lio Convoy points out, like, he was on that bridge with Lion-O, and he was just going to straight up kill Lion-O for not getting out of his way, for disrespecting him. Like, he doesn't think twice about that sort of thing. He's an honorable person, but if you tick him off, even if you're just a boy, he thinks of Lion-O as a child, and he was willing to kill a child for disrespecting him. That's the savagery of a historical samurai, but also with the honor code of a pop culture samurai, and he meets right there in the middle, which I think is one of the things that makes him such an interesting character and an interesting fictional samurai.
Also, he's jacked, boy.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting that he called Lion-O a boy without knowing anything about Lion-O's backstory. So that means that if he sees a guy who's as jacked as Lion-O, his mental process is boy, Arnold Schwarzenegger, boy.
Well, in fairness, when you now know his age, everyone is a young boy to him.
Hachiman flexes his muscles, like, I brought a sword to this gun show.
Good Lord.
Obama can't ban these katanas.
All right, so let's go ahead.
Does his headband mean anything? Like the blue shape with the, is that just like, is
what
that
he
decoration, or is that
what he has is called a hachimaki, and the blue pieces are steel. The purpose of it is to guard against head blows when you're not wearing your kabuto or your helmet. And specifically,
that's what Naruto got inspiration from.
Well, yes, right, historically, yes, that's exactly where their headbands come from.
Okay,
but they don't wear it around their eyes like little robber masks.
No,
the Ninja Turtles got it wrong.
But speaking of the mask, his mimpo, which is what covers his eyes, that's what makes you basically understand generally the area he comes from. Because a lot of samurai, their mimpo was to make them look more fierce, to make them look horrifying. You see some mimpo with large mustaches or with demon faces, whereas Hachiman's, its purpose is to cover his eyes for whatever reason. I don't know where that came from, but it leaves his mouth wide open because I guess his intent is not to scare you with his face. It is to scare you with, I'm going to cut you to pieces and there's nothing you can do about it. The one thing that I don't like about Hachiman's demeanor, which likely comes from the specific time period he's taken from, is samurai after the Sengoku Jidai, they were supposed to wear two swords. Either a tanto or a wakizashi, and their long sword, which is either a katana, a daisho, or a tachi. But Hachiman doesn't have a secondary weapon. That's really my only real gripe there. But everything else...
Well, why would he need a second one if he's got the Thundercutter?
For indoors. That's literally why it's there, for indoors, because a tachi or a katana is not the best thing when you're in the little paper houses. It gets stuck on the entryway.
Yeah, right. Your reach would be too wide, and it would get
okay, wait.
Get in the way.
Is the second shorter sword also to be used for seppuku?
Very rarely.
Or is that an urban myth?
Very rarely. Okay. You'd use it for seppuku if you had nothing else, like on a battlefield. But generally, seppuku was a very ceremonial thing. So you would get a proper tanto. You would write down your poem or whatnot, and depending on the era, you would cut yourself twice in the stomach, and then somebody would take your head. Or it got to a point sometimes where all you'd have to do is reach for the tanto to show that you intend to cut yourself, and then somebody would take your head. I think during the Meiji era, or before the Meiji, during the revolution, right before then, the shogun wound up banning seppuku for quite some time. It was interesting, but let me go ahead and read off the character background of Hachiman. A true friend to the Thundercats, the samurai Hachiman lives his life by the code of Bushido and will honor his friends to the death. He's introduced in the first season story, the Thundercutter, where Mum-Ra brings him to Third Earth and tricks him into fighting Lion-O. Hachiman carries his famed sword, the Thundercutter, which, like the Sword of Omens, possesses great powers and will not respond to evil. Hachiman makes several subsequent appearances, aiding the Thundercats in their quest to free Third Earth from evil. Dr. Robert Cuisis made a following analysis of Hachiman for his moral commentary on the Thundercutter. Honor is excellence of character, aspects of which include dignity, integrity, courage, and pride. In this episode, Lion-O, who lives by the code of Thundera, meets the samurai Hachiman, who lives by a code that includes honor. The honor of Hachiman, however, is almost subverted by the deception of Mum-Ra, who attempts to have him and his sword fight on the side of evil against Lion-O and the code of Thundera. During the course of their encounter, Lion-O and Hachiman, blinded by a false bravado, lose their perspective and engage in a duel. Neither claims he can back down and maintain respect and honor, but true honor is not a confrontation, which ignores the rightness, justice, and truth of one's actions. In a standoff in which those principles are ignored, no one wins. Were it not for the practical good sense of Neda, both Lion-O and Hachiman would have perished for a distorted notion of honor. They are brought to their senses by the power of their swords, which are unable to be used for evil purposes. Reminded of true honor, they join forces and persevere against Mum-Ra, the mutants, and the honorless ninja. In our lives, we must be careful to learn the real definition of honor, which involves reference to righteousness, justice, and truth. We must be on guard so that we do not fall victim to false bravado, which ignores judgments about the purpose of our actions. And that's what it says about Hachiman as a character.
No, that's pretty much and all of that's established just in this first episode, and he was in like 4 or 5 episodes, right?
I think he was in about 6. Now that I think about it, I'd have to sit. Okay. Hold on, let me see here. Thundercutter, Thundercats, Ho, Part 4 and 5. Let's see, the Jade Dragon, and Hachiman's Honor. So 5 episodes.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, just this one episode, they establish his character so economically, and it's not rushed, it's not loaded. I mean, a lot of just who he says who he is, because he talks about his moral code. Mum-Ra gives some exposition about where he came from and stuff, but most of what you understand about Hachiman, you pick it up visually just by the way he acts, the way he behaves, what he does in the episode. It's just a really good way of establishing a character, and he does feel so vivid and substantial. As opposed to other characters who often show up in the series, who are just kind of like thin. You know, you end up with someone like as much as I liked him as like I guess a 2-off villain, the Inflamer. You know, the Inflamer isn't Hachiman. Hachiman's much more interesting. Yeah.
All right. So, any final thoughts on the character Hachiman before we get into the madness?
I understand why he's your favorite now.
Yeah, the secondary characters, absolutely.
Okay, I'll just say that Hachiman's good, but he's no Vulture Man.
I mean, who can be? Only Vulture Man can be. And even the 2011 Vulture Man isn't quite as Vulture Man as he should have been.
No, we're setting up impossible standards if we compare everyone to Vulture Man.
Well, I mean, you got to reach higher heights, my dude. But anyways, as much as I hate to say it, let's go ahead and move on from this to the 3rd issue of He-Man Thundercats. All right, Marm, since you got us in this mess, you get to take a lead on this one.
All right, so everything we hated and made us sad about the first couple issues continues. We have a narrator who's giving us some sort of pseudo-philosophical commentary on the nature of good and evil, and you wonder, oh, gee, who's the narrator? In this issue 3, the Thundercats combat Skeletor, who has literally ingested Mum-Ra as a milkshake. I wish I was making this up. Skeletor gives us some cutesy-bootsy commentary throughout. He kicks Lion-O in the gonads. The Thundercats roast Lion-O for fighting with them, which is something they never do. Lion-O basically loses an eye because we got to have some grim, edgy violence. And we find out the narrator is... Oh, yeah, and let's not forget there's some really hilarious cartoon violence between Skeletor and Mum-Ra. Like I think
There's,
that would
it's
work with.
literally like stop hitting yourself, stop hitting yourself.
Stop hitting
They
yourself.
go there. So bad.
It ends with Lion-O discovering that He-Man. They try to resurrect He-Man, and that's who the narrator was all this time. Because wow, we didn't know who the narrator was. What a surprise! And they unleash the ancient spirits of evil as giant monsters with swords, and it really annoys me that they gave the ancient
Well,
spirits of
hold on.
evil
Let's go ahead and focus on issue 3 before we get into issue 4.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, is that issue 4? I thought okay, the ancient spirits of evil
It
show up
ends
right
with
at the end.
that's a
Yeah, them
cliffhanger.
showing up.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Well, full disclosure,
So-
I only read number 3. By the way, I forgot that we were doing 2 issues, so
Ree!
I can talk about number 3.
You only took what is it? Reading this comic book is 6 of the best, and you only have taken 3 strokes so far.
I only took half the cyanide capsule. Sorry.
But yeah, it does end with them being given form for whatever asinine reason. But all right, Mark, you go ahead and give us your thoughts on this 3rd issue.
God, I hate this dialogue. It's so childish and immature, and just this banter back and forth between Mum-Ra and Skeletor. They're calling each other stupid names like hey, "Shut up, dumb Ra!" Like you shut up, and they do the "Stop hitting yourself," and I don't know why. It's so
With what
childish.
army jackass?
And with
Mum-Ra says
jackass, you know,
jackass.
it's like, and that's the thing that's really irking me for a number of reasons is that like find a freaking tone and stick with it, because they're doing these like really childish things like, you know, calling each other dumb Rob, but then they'll do swearing like jackass, you know, and then like Lion-O will get like his eyeball cut out, like they're putting in violence. It's like, so they want to be like a grim, dark, mature Thundercats in He-Man, but then they also want to be really like G-rated and goofy and silly and putting in this childish dialogue. And it's like, what is it? Like, the writer doesn't seem to know. They can't strike a tone. They can't make a decision. And all of that dialogue is just so out of character. I mean, everyone acts out of character, but then they also speak out of character, and you can't hear the voices of the actors in your head because that's not something they would ever say. God, like, and everyone's quipping all the time. Like, even Tigra doesn't quip, you know. And Cheetara like is really disrespectful to Lion-O. It's almost like they accidentally wrote the 2011 Cheetara instead of the 1980s Cheetara, because there's a part where she tells like Lion-O screws up like momentarily in the fight with Mum-Ra, and then she just tells him like, Lion-O, like stop, you're getting in the way. You just hold back and stay right there, and we'll take care of this. Like, it's really disrespectful. She's talking to the Lord of the Thundercats. You know, they're a family, but there's also this hierarchy. Like, Cheetara doesn't talk to him that way. No one does.
Yeah.
They're supportive, but they don't disrespect their lord like that. It's everything about it is bad. And I mean, it's one of those things where this is an F grade comic. It might be a C minus or a D plus grade comic if you just wiped all the dialogue and recaptioned it with a better writer. I mean, the storytelling beats would still be off, but at least you would read it and not cringe quite as much. It's just so poorly amateurishly written, and it's a huge wasted opportunity and just a waste of resources. And I imagine having to pay for 2 licenses, you know, from 2 different companies probably wasn't cheap, and they just blew it on this piece of crap. I hate it. And every time you tell me we got to review one of these comics, Lyle, I'm like, no, you can't make me.
But I do. You must suffer with me.
Right. I guess I'm gonna have to read 4, because we're gonna do 5 and 6 next time. So I need to follow this engrossing storyline. So I will catch up and read 4 before the next one. But I can only suffer so much.
All right, let me find.
All right,
There's something I wanted to cover here concerning the art, but I gotta put the images up. I have to be very careful here because, unfortunately, my friends at the Fans of Power podcast, which is the He-Man centric podcast some friends of mine do, they wound up getting their live stream shut down because they were showing pages from a comic on it.
Yeah.
That'll happen.
Creepy YouTube algorithm stuff.
Yes, but let's see here.
It's because there are YouTube channels that are literally, they're called like story times, where they will read the entire comic and show every page of it. And that's what's getting like DC and Marvel and all these rights holders, all their panties in a twist because people are spoiling and posting entire comics on YouTube. So now, you post one page, you're not obviously not posting the whole comic, but you post one page, and it hits that algorithm.
Well, what I'm going to be doing right here. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's only happened to me once, and I appealed it, and I did okay because I only showed like about 10 pages while reviewing something. So I don't know. Maybe they're tougher on live streams because they perceive that as, oh no, someone's live streaming a movie. We got to shut them down. I don't understand the ways of YouTube, and it seems like every time they take a break and let the robots run thing, people get false flagged or something.
There's a lesson to be learned in that.
Yep.
All right. What I went ahead and did was this from my old issue 3 review. Few things I want to comment before I get into this, though. Skeletor's transformation into, like, the power of Grayskull Skeletor. Number one, why does he have He-Man's Iron Cross? That's not indicative of the power of Grayskull. She-Ra doesn't have one, so why does Skeletor? Just the entire book's garbage, but one thing I wanted to point out here concerning swordplay and choreography, and I put it in here. You see Lion-O do a cut on the Skeletor's chest, and the placement of the blade makes no sense. So I went ahead and I rotated and did a bit of an edit here. I don't know what they're thinking. I just don't get the art in this, because a lot of people praise it. Well, at least the art's good. Well, it's not. The art's not good. Not only is it not good in the sense that the man clearly needs somebody to do white outlines on every single thing he does, but it's also not good in the sense of how these scenes play out. Like, Lion-O's hands are too close together. The sword's finish cut position is wrong. The sword's path is too shallow. Just, what were they doing? What were they thinking?
I mean, if I were an artist and I knew what the final result was going to be writing-wise, I would phone this one in. I don't want my best art on this one.
Right. I mean, just imagine being Freddie Williams, getting that script, reading it, and being like, "Oh my God, I've got to draw this."
Oh no, he was pleased with it. He thinks it was a good book.
Yeah. We can't. I won't make excuses for mistakes in art. I mean, it is what it is, but it's everything basically rises to the quality that this script demands.
Well, that's not necessarily true, because we got like, what, All-Star Batman and Robin with Jim Lee's art, and the script was complete and utter dog crap, but the art's fantastic.
That's true.
But no, when you are cutting diagonally across somebody's chest, you usually go from Vomtog, which is over the shoulder or to the roof, and you cut down to what's called plow, where the cross guard is near your hip, and you're in a guard position. And what he's done here is a cut from Vomtog to Vomtog, and that's not going to do any good. It's asinine, so I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Well, there's a difference between, in a comic book artist's mind, what looks cool and what actually would work.
Well, this doesn't even look cool. It looks bad. It's bad. Even Couches in the comments like, this makes my eyes bleed.
Like Lion-O's eye did?
The thing for me is, I'm always get annoyed when I see someone recoiling from a punch the wrong way. So if you like punch them with your right hand, they're supposed to twist to their right away from the punch. But if they're twisting backwards, like the artist might draw something like that because while they're drawing it on the page, oh yeah, he's twisting away this way, that looks so cool, but they aren't thinking about the physics of the punch. And I'm sure the same applies to sword techniques, guns. People always forget about trigger discipline when they're drawing guys with guns.
They put the scope right up to their eye, They have a rifle and they put their eye on the scope, like, oh wow, you're gonna cave your skull in, go ahead, pull the trigger.
Do it, you pussy. Let's see here, where's the fight? But
just
no,
the part where Lion-O gets that scar on his face. That is so cliche to have the scar down your eye. Like, geez, that's so lame. But it's also like that. Skeletor's slash is really heavy and powerful, but the cut is shallow on his face because obviously they didn't want to cleave his head in two. So instead, it's like he just got this scrape down his eye to give him that scar. And it's just like, that's so lame, and it doesn't read well, it doesn't look well, it's not worth it. Why is this even in here?
Correct.
I hate this comic.
I hate it too, and we're about to get even worse into it. So, alright, so now that we've gone over issue 3, and some things we hate about it, let's go ahead into issue 4, Marm, since, again, you got us into this mess. Why don't you go ahead and give us your thoughts on issue 4?
All right, Lion-O has the bright idea that if he puts He-Man into Mum-Ra's cavern, he can resurrect He-Man. I was gonna say, it's an okay idea to have the two main characters fight, to have one of them go insane, because at least it's not some stupid misunderstanding that's leading to the fight. And at first, it's a really rough fight for Lion-O, where you get the feeling that He-Man has more raw power, and Lion-O holds up the Sword of Ormans and says, "Give me power beyond power,"
Mm-hmm.
which like which is like referencing "Give me sight beyond sight," but apparently he can just be more powerful if he wants to be.
Point of order, he has done that before, specifically in the episode Return to Thundera. That's where that phrase comes from.
Oh, dang it. Okay, so I'm a fake geek guy. All right. So,
no, you just need to finish the episodes, Marm!
Okay, Marmaduke. In issue number 3, Lion-O freaking says, like, feel my magic, hear my roar. Like, oh, you're familiar with the theme song too, Lion-O? That's great. But please, continue.
He gives He-Man a vision of the future, and he shows him Skeletor and Mum-Ra ruling, and it's like people are getting burned at the stake, Snarf's head on a pike, literally like a gallows scene of several of the characters. I guess I'm almost transitioning into my thoughts, but He-Man is broken from the spell, and so now they can go take out the 30-foot ancient spirits of evil who are immaculately dressed. I want to know where the ancient spirits of evil get their awesome outfits. What's the ancient spirits of evil hot topic is what I want to know.
Egyptians Big and Tall store.
So it ends with the heroes getting back together to go fight the bad guys. So maybe tying into what Mark said earlier is we have like the cutesy bootsy stuff, but then I've advocated before, I wouldn't mind adding some darkness to a children's property as long as you're kind of doing it in the context of, look, kids, evil exists, so I'm not going to sugarcoat that if this bad guy takes over the world, he's going to kill some people. But I feel like, burning at the stake and guys getting lynched, right? Yeah. Have a little respect for the fact, like don't talk down to the kids, but have respect for the fact that you don't need to hit the kid over the head with it, that these guys are evil, right?
This feels like the Wildstorm comics from the early 2000s. It's that level of grim, dark edginess and trying too hard. But you want to know a good example? Like Marmaduke pointed out, a good example of He-Man implementing, higher stakes and maybe a higher rating for the content, and there's an episode of the 80s cartoon. It's the one that everyone says is the best episode of the 80s
Problem with Power.
I think it's called The Problem with Power. Yeah. Yep. And the entire plot of that episode, and it's written so well, is that Skeletor tricks He-Man into thinking he kills someone. And so He-Man is so absolutely distraught and broken emotionally and psychologically that Prince Adam gives up being He-Man and throws the sword away because he doesn't trust himself anymore. And it's a very dark plot, and it's done very well. I think it was the last episode of the series, maybe. Obviously, He-Man finds out that he didn't kill somebody, and Skeletor was just screwing with his head, and so he gets his sword back and everything, and it's all cool. But that was an episode of usually a very light show, but it implemented something much darker and a bit more, not upsetting necessarily, but something that was a bit more complicated than what you would normally get in the show, and it did it very well. That's something and it feels like it fits in with all the other episodes in the universe this is taking place in. But people getting burned at the stake and Snarf's head in the pike and whatever the heck was going on in the Wildstorm comics with Mum-Ra and Wily Kit that I don't want to think about, that stuff doesn't feel like it fits in. That doesn't feel like it's part of that universe. It feels completely incongruent, and it feels like fan fiction, which is unfortunately what this entire comic reads like, is like fan fiction.
Bad fan fiction by people. No, actually, I'm gonna say no, because fan fiction writers tend to know the properties better.
Exactly. I mean, the fan fiction writers almost know it too well, and their stuff can get very esoteric. But there is a certain type of fan fiction. I think we're all used to it. That I think there was there was a Ninja Turtles one from like the early 2000s.
TMNT Gaiden.
God, was it? Yeah, that was it. Where it's like Casey Jones gets his head blown up. It's supposed to be a sequel to the '87 cartoon, but like Casey gets stabbed and there's like blood everywhere, and like Shredder like rips April's clothes off, like that's just a terrible fan comic, but it's the same quality of the Wildstorm and this He-Man Thundercats comic where that's the kind of thing I think about when I think of a fan comic, that goes over the top and does that. This is that level of quality, and it's just awful.
Correct.
Oh, I forgot to mention. Okay, so since I'm not recommending the audience go read this, I want to let them know like one more horrible thing for why they shouldn't go read it. So Lion-O teams up with Cringer, and he gets the bright idea. Well, you're a big cat, so that means if I use the power of the Sword of Omens, you must have some Thundercat in you. And Cringer transforms into what he would look like as a Thundercat. It's basically just Cringer with Cringer's head on a humanoid body.
I actually like that. That's my favorite part of issue 4 because you know what? That's the type of silliness I can jive with.
That is something that would be dumb, silly, and fun in a good comic. I would say this is so dumb and so fun, and I'd love it. Yeah.
It's a waste of a good idea. It's something that like even a broken clock is right twice a day. So even like something a terrible book like this can have a moment in it that's interesting. It's just everything else surrounding it is so lousy. I think there's lots of bad movies, that have like that one part in it that's good, and then the other, 89 minutes are terrible. And that's what this comic is. It has like transformed Cringer into a Thundercat. Hey, that sounds kind of neat. Too bad about the other 5 issues.
Well, here's the thing. When we get into issue 4 here, as we're discussing, so Lion-O's idea is, well, I need to revive Prince Adam, so I'm going to take him to Mumra's sarcophagus. Here's some couple issues here. Number 1, Lion-O knows that place is a bed of evil. It is just evil incarnate, and he knows that. Secondly, Mumrana exists. She's Mumra's evil counterpart in Thundercats. I don't like her as a character. I feel she breaks the internal lore. But you could have used that. Or, since these clowns just randomly choose to use asinine Thundercat references, since they use the Treasure of Thundera in the book's finale, why not just utilize it here and use the Totem of Dara on him to bring him back? There's a lot of ways you could have done this. But no, they did it because, we need to make character fight. Grug used Mumra's sarcophagus.
It'd be like if it's the why Batman doesn't take, anytime one of his friends dies, he doesn't just take him to a Lazarus pit and dunk him in it. Because Batman knows that if you go in a Lazarus pit, you come back insane and you probably turn evil like Ra's al Ghul. That's why he just doesn't dunk Barbara Gordon in a Lazarus pit because she got shot in the spine. He doesn't go and dunk Jason Todd in a Lazarus pit because that's not how it works. He knows better. And the people who write Batman comics, at least for the most part, know better. The people writing this book obviously weren't thinking very hard.
Correct.
Where the hell does this take place in the continuity of the Thundercats? I mean, does this?
We don't know.
You mentioned the Treasure of Thundera and the Book of Omens, so it's like it takes place after the original series.
No. It takes place in season 1 because Mumra still has his weakness, even though we still have the Thunder Strike showing up, which is season 2. We have the Treasure of Thundera, which is season 2. We have, They don't know.
They're all treating Lion-O like he's like they treated him at the not really, but they're treating him like he's still a stupid little kid that doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
But it seems like other continuity elements are after like his anointment trials when he doesn't act like that anymore.
Correct.
So the whole thing is just totally senseless.
So let's go ahead and talk about the main reason why they did this entire issue. They had Lion-O and He-Man fight. Now, in the image I have on screen, this isn't bad choreography in terms of a sword fight overall. Especially considering what Lion-O uses. I highly doubt Freddie Williams is aware. But that actually is a disarming technique. Specifically from, I think, the Talhofer manuals, if I'm not incorrect. So it's a viable technique. But what it ultimately does that a lot of people didn't pick up on, and I'm throwing it on the image now, what they show here ultimately is when you do put these characters against each other, where there are no limits, He-Man's going to lose. And I don't think the Motu fans really noticed that because they'd be angrier about this book if it did. Because in the page I just put up here, he was about to decapitate He-Man, and the only reason the sword stopped is because He-Man had returned to his senses. Even though in the previous page it was showing He-Man the possible future, an ability the sword does not have. These people don't know what they're doing. They never have. They just like, Grug want make good fight. Grug think get good book sell. Grug not know how right. It's pathetic. And the fact that these are professionals is sad.
So would you argue that He-Man, like Lion-O could beat He-Man? Because, like, for me, like, there's the skill level, right? Like, you could have you could have the ultimate skilled human warrior, but he can't beat an idiot whose superpower is he can't be killed, right? So would you say that Lion-O is in a range where he actually could deliver like a killing blow to a He-Man? Because I kind of thought the point, I don't know anything about He-Man, but I thought the point of the power of Grayskull was that it was just sort of ultimate. I guess he's not in possession of it right now, though,
No,
so maybe
he was
more killable than normal.
He was. He specifically called upon the power of Grayskull when he broke out of the sarcophagus.
All
right, so here's the thing that a lot of people don't want to address concerning He-Man. The power of Grayskull isn't limitless. It has its limits. The most powerful version of He-Man, canon, is the Filmation cartoon version. His speed feat was being able to run as fast as a whirlwind, which isn't the same as a tornado, so it's under 100 miles an hour. He's able to withstand at least one strike of lightning. By his own admission, says he couldn't take another one, so he can take that by output. And he's able to push one of Eternia's moons. That is the highest feat of strength any character for He-Man has ever had. Some people will start citing about him throwing Castle Grayskull, but that's just a simple structure. Pushing a moon is a much larger feat. Now,
well, it's like the difference between Silver Age Superman and modern Superman. Silver Age Superman could blow out a star with his breath, you know. Modern Superman, you know, has trouble lifting a truck, that kind of thing. You know, there's different versions of the characters that have different power levels. And He-Man's like that, you know. I think kind of like the He-Man sweet spot for me was the 2002 cartoons version, where he was really strong, really powerful. And they went in more in depth as to just what the heck the power of Grayskull was, where it came from, who King Grayskull was, and all that. But He-Man did have limits, and he did. They were a bit more consistent with exactly how far he could go with his strength and exactly what it took to hurt him or weaken him.
Well, there's not just that. It's when you're arguing He-Man versus Lion-O, what you're actually arguing is the Eye of Thundera versus the power of Grayskull. And the reason why you have to bring it to that is because if you were going to remove those from this equation, you have a meta-human Catman that's trained in every single form of Thunderian martial arts versus a humanoid prince with no meta-human abilities.
I mean, Prince Adam was trained by the Masters, so I mean, he does know how to fight, but obviously he's not going to be as good at it as Lion-O. I mean, both of them swordless and powerless. Lion-O is still going to trash Prince Adam.
So we have to measure it by the power of Grayskull versus the Eye of Thundera. The power of Grayskull isn't infinite, and I can say that objectively, and the reason why I can is because you had characters, even the original Filmation, that He-Man and the Sorceress alone could not beat. They had to get help. Characters like Evil Seed or Shigora, these are characters that the power of Grayskull couldn't beat. They had no ability to outlast these characters or to defeat them. They had to get help from even the villains to help put these characters down, as opposed to the Eye of Thundera, whose, I think its top feat is it can go from one end of the galaxy to another in a matter of seconds, which is way beyond the speed of light. It's able to hold an entire planet together. It's able to cover the entire circumference of a star. When you measure them out, the Sword of Omens and the Eye of Thundera are absurdly more powerful than Grayskull. So if we're ordering by measure of power, there's no way He-Man can win if all limits are out. Meaning they
So what you're
Go ahead.
So what you're saying is that Death Battle lied to me.
Death Battle, when I actually contacted Ben from Death Battle back when his Facebook page was a page and not a personal one, and I asked, hey, one thing you missed, one major thing, is the Sword of Omen's ability to reverse transformations. Why was this not utilized in your Death Battle? His response was, and I quote, "ThunderCats has 130 episodes to it. We did not have time to look at every single episode."
Well, then, yeah, that kind of devalues their entire, decision.
Well,
research. That's not an excuse.
I plan on debunking that video in the future, but unlike them, I want to do all my research, and the only thing I am missing to do a complete evaluation is the He-Man DC comic, or not DC comic, the Marvel, the DC comic He-Man run from the 80s. That's all I'm missing. I have the mini comics, I have the newspaper strips, I have Filmation, I have the 2000 series, I have the movie, I have all the modern comics. That's all I'm missing. And once I get that, and I'm able to compile feats, ability, and data, I can do my own video on that, and I can blow them out of the water. It's not going to be hard to do.
I think Death Battle, I mean, as interesting as a premise as it is, and they put a lot of work into at least the animation and stuff, but it always comes down to a popularity contest, not necessarily the objective decision.
Well, I really can't comment on that.
We're going to pull a argument, because this is like the favorite topic of every internet forum to argue, and you can sometimes get interesting, like the thing is, you can try to measure power levels, but then there's also the question of how would a character like use their powers creatively in a given situation. So I always take them with a grain of salt. Like I kind of see death battles between popular characters as interesting insofar as you can reveal something about the character, and you can have like a fun fight choreography out of it. But how the power levels stack up to me is never as interesting as the characters who are engaging in it.
Yeah, well, the Superman versus Goku fight is still correct.
Yeah, Superman.
Right.
Well, that's the thing is I watched that one, and I mean it was interesting, obviously. But if you wanted to do like peak Superman, you would do like Silver Age Superman, where he would just have the craziest powers.
But that's
and they didn't do that.
No, but they admitted the reason why they didn't. Like, that's not even close to being fair.
No, and that's the thing is like I want to see like Silver Age Superman who can shoot a little man out of his hand. And I want to see that Superman fighting Goku. I want to see a Superman that if he kisses Goku, Goku gets amnesia. I want that Superman. Yeah. For reasons.
Something I've always thought would be interesting is if you have a character who is clearly more powerful than another character, like is there any set of conditions under which the weaker character could win, period? Like, because it like if you ask like a little kid, hey, come up with the most powerful character ever, they can say once upon a time there was Macho Man and his power was he could never lose, right? Like that's not interesting. But is there ever a point in Goku's life where he's more powerful than like animated series Superman or something like that? It doesn't always have to be the most powerful version of the character under like the best possible set of circumstances to unlock all of the powers they could ever have.
We have to pay for the downloadable data.
Yeah, I feel like this is like a big conversation in and of itself, but
it is.
It's one of the differences between like Dragon Ball Z and Justice League is that Superman doesn't beat the villain every time. Batman can beat him sometime, or the Flash can beat him, or Wonder Woman, or Hawkman. Goku beats the villain every time in Dragon Ball Z, with the exception of Cell. But even that was after Goku died and Gohan's the only one left. And that's what I like about Justice League or Avengers comics is that the other characters, regardless of who they're fighting, just by virtue of their own intellect and their ability to be clever with their powers and their abilities, have just as much chance of defeating Amazo or Darkseid or whoever as Superman would. Whereas you read Dragon Ball and it's like Krillin's not going to beat Frieza. Vegeta's not going to beat Cell. It's all just waiting for Goku to show up and save the day. He's going to be the one to beat the villain every time.
I think that Toriyama is slightly aware of this because I've read like one volume of Super, and in it they make a joke that there's a guy they can't kill, and so everybody starts thinking, how do we summon up enough power to atomize this guy? And then Goku gets the bright idea to just drag him and throw him out of the ring because that's one way to win. And nobody there, including all the super geniuses, thought of that. They were all thinking about getting to a super transformation where you could atomize the guy who can't be atomized. So I see Toriyama as just a prankster comedy guy who tripped by accident and started the modern Shonen Jump franchise. He's just laughing along with everybody else who's making fun of him.
Like power levels don't mean anything, and he said that on multiple occasions where it's like, I just made those up. The numbers don't mean anything. But yeah, I think we're getting way off topic now.
We are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we probably got to sew it up for the night.
Correct. We have to. But next time, now that we've covered Hachiman again, we have to cover a villain. So what do you guys want to talk about for next month?
Oh, boy. Okay, so we did a hero this week, so we've got to do a villain next week, right?
Month, yes.
We done all the mutants? Is there anybody we've missed?
I don't think we've done quite a few of the mutants, honestly.
Okay, well, do you want to talk about Slide? Yeah.
Let me see if we have talked about him recently. Give me a second here.
Handy dandy checklist?
I don't keep a checklist. I just scroll down my channel. Let's see here, the ThunderCast. I probably should have a checklist. But Grug not smart enough to do that.
No.
As far as you can see here. Because I think we did.
I don't think it was an episode I was on. So
no, it wasn't.
Got to talk about Slide.
It couldn't have been. Let's see here. Problem is I keep also getting random videos from my channel. and from the artist called Thundercat. Groon, Mongor. Let's see here. I say we just do it, and if we did, we did.
Yeah. I don't see any cops around. Let's do it.
I am the cop.
Yeah, no, there's some actually a lot to talk about Sly. Maybe not as much as Vulture-Man, but there's actually a bit of backstory that he's got, and they do bring it up a few times in the show. I've noticed as I watch.
But 80s cartoons don't do backstories.
No, yeah, right. No, isn't it all really shallow and then just?
Grug wants to sell toys. All right, well, we'll talk about that, and we'll go into the next 2 episodes of Thundercats. Let me go ahead and double check to see which 2 of those will be, since we just got done with Sixth Sense and Thundercutter. It's going to be the Wolf Rat and Feliner. You guys want to cover 3 episodes, because it's got Feliner Part 1 and 2?
Let's go ahead. Yeah, I feel like that kind of counts as 2 stories, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, we kind of, I don't know, we can't talk about a part 1 and not talk about a part 2 and get the full coverage of it, So yeah, let's do all 3.
Killer. So we're gonna cover Slithe, the Wolf Rat, Feliner Part 1 and 2, and we're gonna finish out He-Man Thundercats for the technically 3rd time on this channel. You can again send your hate towards #1 Marmaduke fan.
I a little inside every time we have to read one of these. Thanks, Marmaduke.
He will have.
You missed when we got to do the actual good crossover, didn't you, Mark?
He did.
The good one was
all the good things, don't I?
Battle of the Planet. Go ahead and just read Battle of the Planets Thundercats just for a fun comic sometime.
Yeah.
You're looking for just like a
I read
total
it way
blast.
back in the day when it first came out, and I've forgotten about it completely. I don't remember hating it, so yeah, I do need to read it again.
It's the only good crossover, which is sad because they've had a few.
The only good one.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and cut loose. Everybody say their goodbyes, and we'll see you guys next month.
See ya.
Thank you for having us on.